I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for joining us from our studios in Israel. Coming up in today's newscast, Muslim groups clash over the new Temple Mount security measures. Prime Minister Netanyahu speaks up against a ceasefire in Syria, and a famous Japanese violinist expresses her gratitude for the Jewish state. Stay tuned for the latest news in Israel. Following Friday's shooting terror attack on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Israel has implemented a series of new security measures, and many Muslims are absolutely livid. On Friday, 3 Israeli Arabs from al-Fahim in northern Israel opened fire on police on the Temple Mount, killing 2. Reportedly, at least one member of the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf, the organization that controls the Temple Mount, assisted the perpetrators of the attack. Now, Israel has placed metal detectors around the area and set up security cameras to monitor the holy site, and Palestinians are not happy about it.
أنا بعتقد إنه لا يحتاج نتنياهو لذرائع من أجل كل ما يقوم به الآن، سواء إغلاق المسجد الأقصى المبارك لهذه الأيام وهي سابقة تشكل خطرا وجريمة بحق الفلسطينيين والأمة العربية والإسلامية جمعاء. والأمر الثاني هو أيضا ما يقوم به الاحتلال في سياق البوابات وفي سياق فرض الأمن وفي سياق كل ما يقوم به هي محاولة لفرض بقايا على الأرض.
The leader of the southern branch of the Islamic movement is also now saying that Jews should not be allowed up onto the Temple Mount at all in the same numbers as previously, and many Muslims agree.
نحن أهل المسجد الأقصى وراضيين في المسجد الأقصى والمسجد الأقصى عقيدة ولن يكون المسجد الأقصى إلا للمسلمين فقط.
People who think this way aren't alone either. Members of the Jordanian parliament are condemning Israel for temporarily closing the Temple Mount and are calling the terrorists martyrs of Allah who sowed and watered the pure land. Support for the terrorists is also coming from some Arab leaders within Israel as well. Israeli President Reuven Rivlin says that the wishy-washy responses emanating from Israeli Arab leaders are essentially endorsements of the attack, continuing to state that anyone who doesn't denounce terrorism is collaborating with it. Tensions at the Temple Mount continued on Sunday as Muslims protested and clashed with one another over the new Israeli security arrangements. Members of the Jerusalem Islamic Waqf have called for Muslims to boycott the Temple Mount as long as new Israeli security arrangements like security cameras and metal detectors remain in place. But many Muslims are ignoring the Waqf, proceeding through the metal detectors to pray as they normally would at the Al-Aqsa Mosque and the Dome of the Rock. To Waqf loyalists, though, this is cause for violence. On Sunday, fights broke out between worshippers and Waqf hardliners, and when security personnel intervened, the situation quickly escalated. According to Israel Radio, 10 people were injured in the scuffles and a mosque preacher was detained. Strangely, though, despite the Waqf's public stance, the head of the Islamic Waqf himself, Sheikh Azam al-Khatib, entered the Temple Mount along with several hundred other worshippers, claiming he did not want to leave the site empty. The United States and Russia have finished brokering a ceasefire agreement in southern Syria, and Israel is coming out hard against it, saying it does nowhere near enough to restrain the Islamic Republic of Iran. In Paris yesterday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was vocally critical of the ceasefire, telling journalists that the agreement just helps Iran set up a hostile presence on Israel's northern border. While the plan does have language about keeping Iran 12 miles or 20 kilometers from Israel's borders, it doesn't explicitly mention preventing Iranian expansionist agendas, i.e., it doesn't interfere with Iranian plans for a land route linking Lebanon to Iran through Syria and Iraq, nor does it prevent the establishment of naval and/or air force bases. Netanyahu says that he discussed his issues with the terms of the ceasefire with French President Emmanuel Macron. Senior Israeli officials have also been vocally critical of the deal, describing it as very bad. This is not the first ceasefire in Syrian civil war, and it's unclear how long this one will last for. Previous ceasefires have lasted a few days or a few weeks, but never longer than that. To further explore the updated situation regarding the ceasefire in southern Syria, I'd now like to welcome the director of the Israel Institute for Strategic Studies, Dr. Martin Sherman. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So my first question for you, Martin, let's start this off, is, the agreement as is requires a buffer of 12 miles from the Israel border. So, what does 12 miles buy you?
Well, I'm not quite sure that the exact width of the buffer zone is the main issue here. I think the cardinal issue here is the perpetuation of the Iranian presence in Syria. And I think this is the most disturbing issue about the agreement, rather than any geographical parameter one way or the other. And you know, in the Middle East, it's always rash to be optimistic. And I think as this deal unfolds, people who supported the Iranian agreement signed by the Obama administration are going to have to do a lot of soul searching, because it's quite clear that that agreement empowered Iran in many ways and gave them far more degrees of freedom to act as a patron in Syria.
I see. So, you know, so going back to the ceasefire, though, you know, it's brokered between Russia and the United States. Why is Bibi talking to Macron about this?
Well, I suppose he's just expressing his opinion on the international stage, but you make a good point. The agreement is between Russia and the United States, and to a certain extent Jordan. Yeah. But is Syria part of it? You know, that's the question.
Yeah, I mean, you'd have to assume that Assad is being represented by Putin.
Well, yes, perhaps, but then Putin and Iran have very similar interests as to the continuation of the Assad rule, which is a red light for Israel. And the other question is, who is going to monitor it? How are they going to treat violations? So there are a lot of unknowns which are all very disturbing for Israel.
Now, all these unknowns, you know, if we're talking about the language of the deal, then, you know, what do we know about this deal? Because they started brokering this a week ago. The ceasefire was already broken during that week. Yeah. And then now they're saying it's done, we have it.
Well, that's one of the problems. There's a lot of uncertainty, a lot of shrouds this agreement. And I don't think anyone really knows. I've searched quite vigorously to find the details, and it's not easy to find the details, who gets what the penalties are for violating it. And so I think Netanyahu is correct in expressing deep concern over the agreement.
What do you think Netanyahu will do to prevent Iranian arms, you know, or establishments from popping up along the border, going to Hezbollah, going to Lebanon, going to whoever? What do you think that he'll do in the wake of this agreement? Let's say that it holds, that the ceasefire does hold. Will he feel pressure not to act over Syrian air?
Well, I don't know what you mean by if it acts and there are violations, because basically if the agreement holds, you will not have an Iranian presence or a non-Syrian presence on our border in the Golan.
Well, he's worried though that Iranian arms and other, forceful measures and things like that will end up in the hands of Hezbollah and other terror groups.
Well, that's
in
the
Jordan.
whole point, that Hezbollah is not supposed to be there on this agreement, because the Israeli border, as far as I know, the buffer zone there is only supposed to be for Syrian forces and not for non-Syrian forces. So if the agreement holds, there won't be non-Syrian forces like the Hezbollah deployed there. If the agreement is violated, which I think is probably the more plausible option, then Netanyahu is going to face very difficult situations, because it's not as if now you're just attacking, as before, Syrian positions. You may be taking Russian positions, Iranian positions, and so the whole situation seems to be very, very volatile.
It seems very complicated and volatile, I think, is the most accurate word. Thank you very much for coming in, Dr. Martin Sherman.
Thank you.
All right. Now, last week, political underdog Avi Gabbai defeated Amir Peretz in the Israeli Labor Party primaries, and now Peretz is saying he's standing behind his new boss in renewed efforts to unseat Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu from power. Gabbai and Peretz met yesterday, and Peretz says that the meeting was held in good spirits. The former Israeli defense minister says that he will contribute to the best of his abilities to create greater backing for the Labor Party and its elected chairman. As a goal, Gabbai has told labor activists that the campaign to replace Netanyahu began with his ascension to Labor Party leadership, and he wants the party to double in size from 52,000 people before the next election. Labor has not held power in Israel since 2001, and the center-right Likud party consistently polls well ahead of it. Even while the prime minister is being dogged by investigations and allegations of corruption over a naval submarine deal, which his former ally, former defense minister Moshe Ayalon, says he's guilty of, it still may not be enough for Netanyahu to lose power. And even if Netanyahu loses control of the Likud, the deep support for the Likud in peripheral and working-class communities could keep the party at the top. Israeli soldier Elor Azaria, who was convicted of manslaughter, is now being released under house arrest. until the Israeli military court rules on the appeals filed both by his defense and military prosecutors. AlTV's Max Keisler has more on the case. Max, which way is the wind blowing here? Is there any new information for Azaria to be presenting in his defense?
In a way, yes. I mean, I think his original defense, that the terrorists might have still been a threat and it was his call to make, that has some more credibility after the Temple Mount attacks.
How so?
Well, at this point, most of Israel's seen the footage, the security footage from the Temple Mount. One of the terrorists was on the ground neutralized, and then he got back up and kept attacking the police officers. And Azaria's defenders had said that if he serves his sentence, it'll hurt Israeli deterrence against terror. The courts might be sympathetic to that argument now.
I see. All right, well, let's see the rest of your report.
Elor Azaria, the IDF soldier who shot dead a neutralized terrorist in March 2016, is set to go home after being confined to a military base for over a year. That time will not count toward his 18-month sentence, and neither will his time on house arrest at his parents' house in Ramleh. But if his defense team's appeal goes through, Azaria may go free. His lawyers are claiming that the prosecution lacks evidence that he premeditated the shooting, and they're also arguing that the military is arbitrarily applying the law, as other soldiers have not been tried for similar actions. But the prosecutors are also appealing the case, claiming that Azaria's sentence does not match the severity of his crime. The Azaria trial is extremely divisive in Israeli society, with his detractors calling him an embarrassment to Israel, but his supporters say his actions were justified and maybe even necessary.
This court should have not even been televised. He was sent to the army to do something. He did his job. If you want to condemn him or to give him a slap on the wrist or something, do it in the army court, not on the television. Not like that. It's not fair.
The Israeli government has just announced that there are no official plans to change the law on allowing gay couples to adopt a child in Israel. AlTV's Emmanuel Kadosh reports.
In response to a high court petition asking to allow common law couples and same-sex couples to adopt, the government said that allowing same-sex couples to adopt would place an, quote, additional burden on the child. Therefore, they are opposing to change the law. The government wrote to the court that, quote, the professional opinion of the Child Welfare Service supports preserving the existing situation, which only allows a man and a woman to adopt a child. The government says that, quote, it takes into account the reality of Israeli society, i.e. the huge LGBT community in Israel, and yet they still choose to leave the law as is. Many lawmakers, such as Meretz's Michal Rozin, who heads the Knesset's LGBT lobby, as well as Yael German of Yesh Atid, and many more, said in a statement that, quote, this is a foolish and discriminatory decision that is accompanied by the unprecedented homophobia. They continued on to say the Israeli government is again abandoning the gay community, and this highlights government's cynical use of the community. In English, they boast about being a gay-friendly country, but in Hebrew, they deny basic rights.
A Palestinian man has just been caught crossing from the Gaza Strip into Israel with several valuable coins that could be worth up to thousands of dollars. The border crossing authority nabbed the perp red-handed at the Erez border crossing. He was in possession of 4 coins depicting Hercules, a demigod, and Zeus, the god of thunder and leader of the gods of ancient Greece. In the coin, Zeus is sitting on a throne holding a scepter and an eagle. The coins are around 2,300 years old and appear to have originated in Egypt in the Ptolemaic kingdom. For hundreds of years, Egypt was ruled by Greek-speaking Hellenistic rulers descended from Ptolemy, one of Alexander the Great's generals. It's unclear just how much the coins are worth, but it could be a lot. Well-preserved antiquities in good condition fetch high prices on the black market, but I suppose this man will never know that. Now, the Greek Orthodox Church has sold off more of its real estate holdings in Israel, and this time, it's not just houses. It's some of the ancient Roman ruins in Caesarea. AlTV's Max Keisler returns to the studio with more on the story. Max, tell me what's going on.
Well, the Greek Orthodox Church is the second largest landowner in Israel. Even the Knesset is on Greek Orthodox land. And apparently Caesarea was one of their possessions. They've just sold it. This raises a lot of questions. That's a great historical asset. And the Israeli authorities are saying they'll do what it takes to preserve its history, which is quite interesting stuff.
All right, well, let's hear some more.
King Herod was an ambitious man, but as a client of the Roman Empire, there was little he could do to express these desires politically. So he built. He built the largest temple complex in the ancient world. He built the massive palace of Herodium in the Jewish desert, with a grand mausoleum he was most likely buried in. And he built Caesarea, a Hellenistic city named in honor of its Roman patrons. With its Roman temples, baths, and amphitheater, it was a piece of the empire in Judea. And it was even the place where the Jewish revolt kicked off, when Greek merchants made idolatrous sacrifices in front of a synagogue. Today, its ruins are visited by thousands every year. But now that the Greek Orthodox Church, the owner of the property, has sold off 172 acres of land there to an unknown investor, it's unclear what Caesaria's future will be. The Parks Authority is promising to, quote, ensure the protection of the ancient assets of the land, and the Justice Ministry says they will intervene in the deal.
The Ministerial Committee for Legislation has come to a decision, and it's to support the anti-prostitution proposals being pushed forward in the Knesset. The only catch is that it's waiting until the Justice Ministry has its own bill ready. The vote by the committee means that the governing coalition will support anti-prostitution legislation. Following the ministerial vote, Justice Minister Ayelet Shaked said that eradicating prostitution is an important goal with broad support across the spectrum of Israeli politics. Right now, there are 2 anti-prostitution bills being deliberated in the Knesset, both of which would target the clients or Johns and provide rehabilitation services for ex-sex workers. One bill is being pushed by the bipartisan team of Jewish Home Knesset member Shuli Moalem-Rafaeli and Meretz member Zehava Galon. The other is the brainchild of Yesh Atid MK Aliza Lavi. Lavi tweeted to say that history is being made and that the unprecedented public support will lead to a dramatic social reform. Now, Israeli music has evolved a lot in the last 70 years, which is to be expected considering a new amalgam culture that would eventually be known as Sabra was forming right alongside it. Well, my next guest is an Israeli rock singer and actor known simply as Adam, and is here today to tell us more both about his work and his experiences in Israel in the Israeli music scene. Thank you so much for coming in. It is a pleasure to have you.
Oh, thank you. Nice to be here.
Thank you.
Speak slowly.
I will speak slowly. I will speak definitely slowly with you. So my first thing...
No, it's okay.
So my first...
Speak as fast as you want.
So my first question for you, Adam, is, tell me about what it has been like working in the Israeli music scene for as long as you have. I mean, this is your first album, I think you told me, and it was 30 years ago.
Yeah, particularly this album was not produced on disc since '87. Wow. It was only on plastic, on vinyl. It was on tapes and plastic. Now, 30 years after, we took out a very, how do you say it, edition, but it's a...
like remastered?
Yeah, but we don't sell it to public. It's only Bellet,
Oh, like the subscribers, the main fans.
Yeah, only 300 copies of this.
Wow, limited
offer. Limited,
that's it,
limited edition. And it's nice because when I started my career at 86, I was crossing between the analog style into the digital style. This album was completely analog.
And then album number 2 is already digital?
It was half analog, and then I went into the digital music life to hold this one in a small size. It's nice because usually it was, like quite big. And it's coming together with 30 years for this album, and we're going to celebrate it on the 30th of July on Zappa Club, Tel Aviv. We take all the songs of this album and probably some more hits because my career didn't start and ended with this album. I had some more after, another 7 albums.
Yeah, which I want to get to, by the way. I want to talk about that a little bit. Oh, okay. So, so like you just said, you have 7 studio albums, this being your first. And I hear, you told me earlier you did one with Kabbalah, with a Kabbalah Center in California. Can you tell me a little bit about that experience?
The Kabbalah are sitting in LA. They had an idea how to send the Kabbalah understanding into the world, and they decided to do it by music. And they were looking for a singer, and they decided it can't be an American singer because the Kabbalah is written in Old Aramaic, and it would be quite difficult to an American singer to do it, and they were looking for an Israeli singer to do it. And fortunately, for me, they picked me. The supervisor.
So you did a whole album in Aramaic.
The whole album. It was like hell. It was more difficult than this interview, I must say. 10 chapters from the Zohar. Wow. They produced it and they wrote it. The music that it was written was totally pop. The let's say, the music supervisor of the album was Madonna.
Wow.
Yes, I even drank coffee with her while she was listening to the work, and that was my 5th album. It was a great pleasure working there, recording there. And afterward, I had another 2, totally 7 albums, which is quite a lot for my years.
So okay, so now I want to get back to your anniversary concert, which, as you said, is at the end of this month on the 30th. On the 30th of July at the Zappa Club in Herzliya, and it's 30 years celebration of this album.
Yeah, I mean, not only this album.
Not all, just
because it will be quite a short show, you know, only 9 tracks that will hold about 50 minutes.
Sure, but it's to celebrate kind of
we're
that
celebrating
that
this together with another few of my hits from the other albums. And what is very, I must say, unique, to my opinion, in the show, that when I decided, in some time I had to decide what kind of musical production I want to do for this show. And then I decided that I'm not changing anything. I'm not going to be one of those artists that is doing this show 30 years after and is like thinking, okay, let's take it in a different way.
Right.
Let's produce it differently. Let's arrange it. I decided that I take the originals and I do it as they are. I mean, it's the same key.
You do what everybody has always loved.
If you come to the show, you almost have the same experience as listening to this. The singer is a bit older. The hair is different, as you can see.
The hair's a little bit different.
It's like, I mean, this.
Well, I hate to cut you off, I really do, but I would love to actually now turn to a hit song from this very album right now, called Ein Motza.
Oh, quite a big hit.
So you can catch that song and many other incredible ones right here on this album, Sod, or Secret. And as we discussed, there's 6 other studio albums. They're all each as amazing as the last. Now, speaking of amazing music, guess who's back, people? The 31-year-old Japanese violinist Sayaka Shoji, that's who. And she was once described by Gramophone magazine as a formidable musician able to draw on huge reserves of stamina and the unflinching equal of anything thrown at her. And she has returned to the Holy Land to put on an incredible performance yesterday. Shoji came to Israel to perform the Tchaikovsky Violin Concerto with the Jerusalem Camerata Saturday night, and with Alexander Bernstein conducting. The program also featured Beethoven's 7th Symphony. The talented and unstoppable violinist appears regularly with the world's leading conductors and started her journey at a very early age. Shoji was given her first violin at age 6, and in 1997, Sayaka Shoji made her way to Israel for the first time. Shoji came to join the Keshet Ailon International Master Course and later appeared with the Israeli Philharmonic under Zubi Mehta. Quote, "Israel has given me so much support in the first steps of my career, although I was not born here. I'm always grateful for this," she said. Though her show has ended, I think I can speak for music lovers everywhere when I tell Shoji that we hope to see her back in the Holy Land soon. Enroll in eTeacher's online Hebrew courses and quickly discover that it creates the deepest connection to Israel that you could ever imagine. And now for our Hebrew word of the day. We just learned of an amazing violinist who came back to Israel to play her heart out, so in that spirit, today's word is kinor, meaning violin. The kinor has been around for a long time, with the earliest known models originating in the 16th century in Italy. Since then, whether accurate or not, the kinor, which also means fiddle, has become a stereotypical instrument for the Jewish people. Just mention the title Fiddler on the Roof and people with kinorot or violins will pop out of the woodwork singing tradition! One thing is for sure though, despite this and I'm sure other stereotypes, the kinor is an incredibly versatile instrument that we see over and over again in every genre of music from classical to rap to indie pop and back. So if you're a kanar or violinist, I just have one final message for you. Keep up the awesome. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the weather forecast. Tonight you can expect partly cloudy skies with a low of 76 or 24 degrees Celsius. Tomorrow temperatures should drop a little bit, but it will still be unseasonably hot with a high of around 90 or 32 degrees Celsius. All right, that's it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.55 shekels to the American dollar. Remember to sign up for our daily newsletter at iltv.tv. I'm Aaron Porras, and thanks for watching.